You're a Catholic. Your wife's Jewish.
Right.
Are you a traditional Catholic?
I was. My mother was really devout Catholic, and
Would you say you still practice or not really?
I'm a cultural Catholic. I believe I don't go to church every Sunday.
Got it.
Okay.
How long have you and your wife been together?
We've been together. We've been married since 1984, but we've been together since 1980, 45 years.
That's awesome. So 45 years. So, you hear right now, like numbers came out on the level of favorability rate for Israel and Netanyahu on specifically Israel on Republican Democratic Party. Republicans before October 7th or right around then, 75% support. Now it's at 64%. It's dropped some 11% to 13%. Democrats went from 55% favorability rate to now 13 or 14%. They've dropped up tremendously. They're not trusting what they're going through. Why do you think that is? Why do you think, Israel, Netanyahu got to this point?
So war is messy, no question about it. If we had social media and cameras and video cameras during World War II, when the British were doing a bombing of Dresden and 40,000 people were killed, or we were doing a firebombing of Tokyo. By the way, those targets were selected because they were civilian targets to break the will of the enemy. We knew there were no military targets there. That's what we were doing. Forget the atomic bombs. The idea was you could target civilians to break it. But here you have an enemy in Hamas that's embedded itself not only in the civilian population, but violating international law by picking the very places like you're picking the equivalent of mosque and schools and hospitals, knowing that those are the safest spots not to be hit at, but you are sacrificing the population. So war is messy. Netanyahu is not a likable person for most people. The same problems that Orban will have from Hungary or whatever else. The people don't like him. And there's another factor here: the coverage in what I call most of the press. So I keep hearing. I watch The Five often on Fox. I like it. It's an old-fashioned show. And I see, the Democrat who's on there will often cite polls and say, Trump's underwater. Trump's underwater on immigration. Trump's underwater on taxes and everything else. Of course he's underwater, because everything except for Fox, a couple of other outlets, the influencers and that, but in terms of all the mainstream media, are all smashing him every day. Trump derangement. They're all covering it negative. They're all talking about the chaos and what ICE is doing and this and that. So it feeds into the public. And the coverage on the Israel-Hamas war, from the BBC to Sky News to the New York Times to all the traditional outlets, has been very, very anti-Israel. It has, I tell you, as far as I'm concerned, Hamas, you talk about Arthur Sackler being a brilliant marketer. Hamas has out-marketed, and I don't mean to say this on October 7th when we're talking about hostages and peace in a way that people think I'm being flippant or cavalier.
You said October 7th. Today is October 7th.
Today is the day, right? But they have won the PR war. They've won it on college campuses. They've won it, and kids think that Israel is just a colonizing country, that they don't quite know what apartheid is. They're not sure what the river to the sea is. Maybe it's the Nile River. Maybe it's something else. They don't understand what it means when you say Islamic fundamentalism. So I get it. They've won that PR war. Israel has not. And I'm not surprised that those numbers have changed. But what I am surprised at is this, and my wife says this all the time. She runs a small organization called Anti-Semitism Watch. She started it in 2022. And you know why? Because she was so aggravated at the ADL. She thought the ADL was essentially an arm of the Democratic National Committee. The ADL only called out anti-Semitism when it was on the right. They never called it out on the left. Through George Floyd and all these groups and everything else, they gave them a pass. So she said, I'm going to call it out on the left as well. What she's surprised at is that she just wrote a piece, as a matter of fact, for the New York Post called London Falling, about how she went back to London for the first time when I did a debate at Oxford, and it looked like a very different culture. She is of the belief that Jews who are Democrats, who still support the Democratic Party, who are voting for Mamdani, the 20% of Jews in New York who are voting for him because they have Trump derangement syndrome and they think he'll be the toughest against Trump or whatever else. It's suicide, essentially, because you are embracing a part of the party that's moving in the left to eventually say, we want boycott, divestment, and sanctions. We want no sales of arms to Israel. We want no Israeli professors coming into schools like Harvard and others. So the left of the Democratic Party is a far greater threat Even with Nick Fuentes saying to you the other day, I'm more concerned with Jews than I am with Muslims. And that's a pretty scary thing for Jews to hear. I think that Jews who are part of the Democratic Party as it's moving to the left and this anti-Israel in the polling, they're embracing a party that is not their friend.
Yeah, but Nick Fuentes also said if he had to choose between living in a community of Boca or Dearborn, he would much rather live in Boca with Jews than living with Muslims. Nick Fuentes said that.
Okay, so wait, but in part, if I can just say, that's because Jews have this thing often about, oh, you know what? Don't say anything. Don't make a big fuss. Oh, yeah, they called us kikes. They knocked the thing off and they threw something at the synagogue and paint. Don't make a big fuss because it'll just get worse. He can say things about Jews here, and they'll say, oh, you're a terrible guy and everything else, but they're not going to come with a baseball bat and take him down. He goes to Dearborn and starts saying that. Let me tell you, he's not going to last very long. So there's a bit of a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Dearborn's a complete different story, but I wonder what part of the onus is on them. You know, what part of the onus is on Netanyahu? What part of the onus is on the way this has been handled? What part of the onus is on the questions that are commonly asked of how they could have done things differently? Because, listen, you can talk to guys who never cared about this, and they are now like, oh, my God, Israel's behind it. Let me tell you, Charlie Kirk, Israel's behind it. Let me tell you, Israel's behind it. Let me tell you. And this is becoming pretty bad. You know, where, you know, it's in my lifetime in America, I've never seen it being this bad.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. Marjorie Taylor Greene sort of thinks it's Israel's war. We're fighting Israel's war. That's it. It reminds me a little bit, by the way, in the late 1930s of the feeling in America that we don't want to fight Europe's war. Remember, there was a big movement. Roosevelt hadn't gotten, that's the question, did Roosevelt allow Pearl Harbor to be attacked? Because there were a lot of Americans who said, by the way, that doesn't affect us. Germans aren't going to be on the shores over here. We're not going to be fighting them. So we don't want to fight Europe's war. Now we're fighting Israel's war. The question you have to ask yourself, which I think is a legitimate one, for me I did a book on the Saudi Arabia, Secrets of the Kingdom. I did a book on 9/11. And I do understand that there is a form, it's a minority, and it was called Al-Qaeda for a while, and then it was called ISIS for a while. Hamas is a small splinter group inheritor to this idea of a religious fundamentalism. You want to call it a death cult or whatever else, but it is an idea of spreading Islamic fundamentalism at its core. The question is, if you have that, is Israel fighting a war? It's fighting a war for its own purposes. Every country puts itself first. Clearly, there's no question about that. But are they fighting a war that benefits the United States at all? Are they benefiting us if they do the Abraham Accords? Maybe so. They certainly are benefiting us if peace breaks out there. But the real question was Iran for a long time. And you, having been born in Iran, I know you're known part Iranian, Syrian. You've seen that country under the mullahs from the return of the Ayatollah become one of the great societies of the Middle East, become terrible.
Horrible. From 79 till today, it's been horrible. But Charlie, when he wrote that letter to Netanyahu, he also said, you have a hard time with telling the story of what's going on. And, the texts are being shared by Candace, the fact that, he was wanting to invite Candace and Tucker to the events, and he was getting criticized for it. So, well, you can't do all this. And he lost like one of the, what do you call it? And by the way, it happens. I remember when I was there when I was at Mar-a-Lago, and Charlie raised $41 million, give or take. And there was a couple, this is where Republicans were second-guessing Trump, and they were going towards DeSantis. And one lady gets up, and she says something like, how do you feel about DeSantis? People want to make sure you're not just only Trump. What if DeSantis is a better candidate? And somebody made a comment. I think some lady made a comment saying, I know some of you guys are worried, but Charlie is what's great. Charlie is about what's great for America, not just one candidate. And that's kind of how they put it. So I can see the tensions of trying to be a Charlie Kirk, trying to make sure, the different factions of the conservative party, because there's a lot of them.
Yep.
There's the business guys. Mm-hmm. There's the AIPAC Jewish, guys. There's the, Christians. There's the Catholics. There's the, pro-life folks. There's the, and then, you're trying to get everybody to want to play ball. There's those guys that think Israel's behind things. There's those guys that are not for Israel. And this is a guy that's in the middle trying to get everyone to play ball. And that's the toughest job in the world. And it was trying to play it. But, for it to get to where it's at right now, like I said, I don't know if I've seen it worse than what it is today. And you can put the blame on other people, but the part of the onus can also go on them.
Well, part of this is, remember when they went after Hezbollah with the pagers? And then they,
of course, the 5,000 pagers,
and they hit in Iran. They knocked out that one.
Yeah.
What that confirmed to me is that the Mossad and their intelligence work, they were focusing on Hezbollah and Iran. Hezbollah and Iran. That's what they thought the threats were.
Yeah.
And they fell asleep, just like I did that book, Why America Slept, Why Israel Slept. They fell asleep on the back door because they never thought Hamas would pull off an actual attack like that. And they even ignored some of the intelligence that came in from field people that thought it was like that. So they clearly, it was a major screw up, completely. And that is going to come, look at Netanyahu's time in office is limited. Churchill left after World War II. I get that, and he will be leaving. And then there will be full investigations. Forget about the financial stuff. There will be full investigations into how did this happen? How was the war prosecuted? What really went on? But it seems to me that it has created this situation in which you have, and Mike Huckabee, how about him as the ambassador over there? Because he has that religious basis, right? As a fundamentalist Christian, to think that Israel has to be in the possession of Jews before the Messiah can come back. It's an unusual thing. So you don't want to lose Israel because that just puts the Messiah coming back for a longer period of time.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what's going to happen. I think right now there's a Hamas back and forth going on, and they almost put a 20-point offer on Hamas that they are not able to say yes to all of it. So it's almost cornering Hamas to be able to do what they want to do. Go ahead.
But you say that, but to me, it seems like there's such an out here for Hamas. So easy for me to say, okay. But they think their only leverage is the hostages. So it's tough for them to give up all the hostages and the dead bodies. Then they think they get wiped out. But if they did that, then the next step, of course, is demilitarizing. That's a harder step. But then there's this interim government put up, which is really Tony Blair and all these people coming in.
Yeah, Trump's at the head of it.
But guess what? No denazification period. What I mean by that is after World War II, we, the Americans, took over Germany together with the Brits. We administered it for 4 years. We did the same thing in Japan. We had a denazification program in which all the Nazis went through and we said, you're bad guys. Look what you did. You killed all these people. Be better. And then we put them back in the government. With Hamas, there's not going to be any of that. There's no de-radicalization period. So some of the people who are now Hamas will be able to work their ways back in. There as administrators. They're people who know how to do things. They will work their way back into this governing body. So when Israel has a red line that says, by the way, no Hamas, they won't be Hamas, if that makes sense. But they aren't going away. They aren't leaving forever on vacation. There's a way. There's no de-radicalization period. I see a way which is going to be very difficult to keep some of the members of Hamas, especially the political wing, away from being part of that administrative group that's running the new government.
It's going to be a tough task. It's going to be a tough task for them to do. And you have to realize, I lived with the Hezbollahs in Iran. Stories of me and my mother and my sister walking in the street, a little bit of hair is shown by mom, and then they show up out of nowhere, and my uncle has to show up, and we witness this kind of stuff in Iran all the time. So there is no negotiating with these unreasonable people. Right. They don't agree with the Western way of living whatsoever. It's a completely different way of living.
And one sidelight, and then I'll get off of this, but I mean, the things that have driven me so crazy for years. I'm watching in England, for instance, these massive demonstrations in which they're actually telling Jews to get out of England, whatever else. Meanwhile, England's arresting 30 people a day for online posts that they don't like because somebody's done a Facebook post. They sent a woman, Lucy Connolly, to jail for 2 years for sending out a post that they thought was incendiary about a British person who was attacked by a migrant. They're enforcing all these speech laws. But on the street, you can say whatever you want if it happens to be about Jews. And I've seen it time and again. I see people getting out there on college campuses here at Harvard, at our best places, saying rape is resistance. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding. You had the Me Too movement. You were fighting for women across the thing. Now you think rape is resistance? I see Queers for Palestine, idiots who actually have a sign with the pride flag saying Queers for Palestine. That's like saying, and I'm not the guy who invented this, but I see it online, chickens for KFC. It's true. Why don't you go to the Middle East and find out what Hamas thinks about you when you're a transgender? So there's been the Kool-Aid has been drunk, like George Floyd. In the aftermath of George Floyd, all those things, people were fired for saying Blue Lives Matter. They were fired for saying white lives matter. Remember that? There was a period at which you couldn't cross that line. And here it seems to me that this is the new, it's sort of caught on in a contagion. It's disappointing to see the extent to which that has happened. Hi, I'm Gerald Posner. I'm an investigative reporter. I've written 13 books about everything from chasing Nazi war criminals to the heroin trade to 9/11 to Saudis to fundamentalists and to the drug industry and to money inside the Vatican. You can ask me just about everything on my next. Reach out to me and talk to me about 9/11. Find out what's happening in terms of the Epstein files. If you want to find out what's happened in the recent Trump assassination attempt by crooks, I'm looking into that as well. I've got a whole series of things, including the transgender industry on children, that are on my hot list. So send me some questions.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.